So now we turn to the presentations of today, and the first presentation is from a man that you know, I think all of you know quite well and admire, Professor Peter Plant from Denmark, who has worked within this field for over 40 years, and mainly in Denmark, but also in Norway now. You're a professor in
I'm
Norway.
the other professor.
Yes, of the two in Norway. And you're also engaged now in the Erasmus Plus project TRIAS, which is guidance in the workplace. And earlier you took part in the workplace guidance project that won awards within the Leonardo project, and many in here were we're also working in that wonderful project, and Fiola Maria was a leader, wasn't you? Yeah. Well, so your presentation is called Out of Office, Career Guidance in the Workplace, How to Reach Out to Low-Skilled Workers, question mark, and guidance offers need to get out of the office. That's your presentation, so please,
right.
I give you the floor.
Thank you. Is there a presentation somewhere on this machine?
It's on the program, sorry. Yeah, okay.
While they're taking care of all this this technical stuff, does this work? No? It's too loud. Okay. Boom, 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 boom. Perhaps there is a technician somewhere. But if I stand somewhere else, will that be better? If I'm in the middle of the people? No, it doesn't work. No.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, dee-dee. Is that better? Does that work? Does that work? Yeah, good. Thanks. Guðbjörg, the other professor in career guidance, we're just the two of us in the Nordic countries, mentioned that there is a link between guidance, adult guidance and adult learning. I'll just remind you that in fact the European Commission has issued 2 resolutions on lifelong guidance. They both build on lifelong learning. There's one from 2004 and there's another one from 2008. So if you're interested in more policy-oriented bits and pieces of this, you can look into the lifelong guidance resolutions of 2004 and 2008. So that's it. Yeah. Yes, I've been in the guidance area for a couple of generations. And originally I'm one of these people who had part-time jobs, both in the school as a careers guidance person, skolevejleder, rådgivningslærer. Then the Swedes will know about the good old model of rådgivningslærer there. And then the other part was being with the employment service. The idea was that you took the students from school and placed them into working life. That was the whole idea. And to do that, you had to have people like me who had a part-time job in each. So I was in the school, and I was there also in the employment service. The Norwegians will remember the good old arbeidsmarkedsetaten. And the idea was that you were both. So I was there for a great many years. I'm now Norwegian. Yes, I'm part-time Norwegian. Yes, yeah. And that's wonderful. I've been on the governmental committee on rethinking careers, education and guidance in Norway from a holistic perspective. Yes, very good. Which have been both a great honor, but also very, very interesting. The idea is you have experts that think about guidance in a lifelong perspective. And then you have a long period of democratic discussion afterwards, and then you decide. Wonderful. It's called democracy, you know. It's a very nice invention. So that's what we've been doing there. If you're interested in looking into how that can be done, I can recommend the NOE, which is number 7 from 2016. Enough of that. No? No?
Be here, Peter, and just roll them.
Oh, I can do that.
Yeah?
That's fine. Let's see.
Yeah.
I thought we might sing a little song. There are some guidance songs, and I'll be talking about boxes, so I thought we'd sing this one. Shall I just hum the tune for you? Okay, it goes like this. Little boxes on the hillside, little boxes made of ticky-tacky, little boxes, all the same. There's a green one, and a pink one, and a blue one, and a yellow one, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same. It gets worse. And the people in the houses all go to the university, and they all get put in boxes, little boxes all the same. And there's doctors, and there's lawyers, and business executives, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same. And they all play on the golf course, and drink their martini dry, and they all have pretty children, and the children go to school, and the children go to summer camp, and then to the university, and they all get put in boxes, and they all come out the same. And the boys go into business and marry and raise a family, and they all get put in boxes, little boxes all the same. There's a green one and a pink one and the blue one and the yellow one, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same. Wonderful, very good. Yes. Oh, wonderful. I didn't even have to hum it. You already were into this. That is good. Thank you very much. I will talk about little boxes. And I'll talk about some of the habits that we have as part of our luggage, the common luggage in career guidance, where we quite often think of career guidance as something which takes place between two people in a box. And we have a model, which is a very old model, on the left-hand side here, you first, where the idea is confession, and I'm not going into that, too much today, but it is really interesting that when people think outsiders, not in our league, of course, but when outsiders think about career guidance, they think of it as two people talking together. One knows better than the other. Listening skills are very important, and it has this air of confession. Talk to me about your problems, sort of thing. And out of that comes a new life, a new orientation in life, and all your sins will be forgiven. Oh, I didn't go to school, but there is adult education. Oh, your sins have been forgiven. That sort of thing. And a personal confession from my side, from my part, is I'm one of the dropouts myself. I confess to you right now. I was thrown out of school at the age of 10 in grade 4. Anyone before that? Any earlier dropouts? No. I can see you late. You were a late dropout. You waited till much later, then you dropped out. Or you didn't. No, you just sailed through the educational system because you were so good at going to school. Yes. Oh, that's why I became a guidance counselor. So I have these, qualifications and competences with me. I learned that school is not for everyone, not for Peter anyway. So that's a very important thing to have in your luggage. But it's interesting that this is the kind of thing we think we're doing, or rather that some people think that guidance is about. So that's part of our luggage, and we think that people will come to us And we do all kinds of things to get out of that little box sometimes. We use ICT has been invented, we use that. But we also use buses, so we take the bus out and the guidance office then comes in the shape of a moving library sort of thing and moves out into the countryside, and it parks right in front of the front gate of the establishment, the institution, the workplace. And then we think that people will come to us. Low-skilled people who don't want to talk to us, the ones that we can't reach, will they actually come to us? Will they come to us in the front shop, this kind of shop? It's called, in English or American, it's called a one-stop center. The idea is that we open our doors and we talk to people about adult education, and the people will then come to us. They'll pour in. We've done that in Denmark and many other countries. Career centers in Norway, one-stop centers in the United States, and these shop front places in Denmark. There are many such examples. Sweden is also full of these places. And it's interesting that they were directed, the money actually went, in Denmark anyway, they went to low-skilled workers, male low-skilled workers. And the ones that came there were middle-class women. Ooh, surprise, surprise. There were some men that came in there to just see whether they could get a free cup of coffee, and that was about it, and they were quickly out again. So it's interesting when you do evaluations of these kinds of efforts, we don't actually reach out to the low-skilled workers, especially not the men. Oh, you want to talk to me about going to school? I've been there. No thanks. That's the standard reaction. Whereas we might see that there could be other ways of doing things. I'm not saying that this is the end answer, but I will try to take you out of the office. That is out of your comfort zone as guidance professionals, perhaps. I say this because I've actually learned over the years that some guidance professionals feel comfortable in their own little office, and they don't feel very comfortable outside of the office. It's a much better position. It's also a power position to be in your own office and then invite someone in, rather than coming out into the workplace and just be a little guidance counselor in a huge place. Ooh, out of my comfort zone. Ooh. And it's interesting that there are also these aspects. But we've done a lot of this, and I'm not saying it's terrible or stupid or anything. It's just it reaches some people, but not all, and perhaps not the ones that we'd like to reach. So we need to get it out on the shop floor. And this is just a little, very personal example. But I have a farm, and on the farm I have Joachim and Roar, and those two have a blacksmith of the traditional sort, and they do restoration work on Danish castles. So next time you come to Kronborg Castle, and you see that all the metal work is lovely there, that's because it was done on my farm. Very, very personal thing. So I have a blacksmith and a yoga center, very interesting. But what we're trying to do, coming out into the actual workplace, is to say we're getting guidance out of the office. We're actually turning the whole thing around. We're trying to see whether in fact that might help. And one day I was actually standing in a workplace. This is the Royal Danish Copenhagen. They make ceramics, and we were standing in front of the oven, in front of the furnace where they actually burn the sculptures. And I was talking to the guy about transferable skills. Do you talk to people in the workplace about transferable skills? No, you don't. We were looking at the furnace, and I said, what's happening? But he said, you see this little color there? The flames are now getting blue. Yeah? That's because we're 2 minutes from reaching the point where it's finished. How do you know? I said. Oh, it's a feeling, over the years, and you're not colorblind, are you? You can see blue as well, can't you? So blue is blue, isn't it? And blue means finished. And then said, what you're doing here, is that very specific? Has it just to do with this furnace and these ceramic sculptures? Yeah. So you don't think you can do anything else than this? No. This is what I've been doing for 25 years, and I'm actually an expert in this. Okay, I said, if you were a baker, what would you be looking at? I'd be looking at the bread, of course. When is bread ready? Oh, it's not blue, he said. He got the point. It's not blue, it's brown. So that means the bread is ready. So we were talking about concrete things in the workplace. I was not the counsellor sitting in an office. I was actually talking to him about his work, what he did. And he was being transferred because his old workplace and the old furnace was being shut down, and he would move to something else. So we talked about transferable skills, the link between looking at the furnace, the stove, the oven, which actually produced the ceramics, as compared to the transferable skills which would go into baking. You get the point here? So now I'm actually diving into his work, his circles, what he thinks, and I'm trying to illustrate concretely with him in the actual place. It's 600 degrees, we're hot. We're standing in front of his work. And I'm saying, what you're doing here perhaps would be transferable to something else, even though you think you've done this for 30 years and you can't do anything else. That sort of thing. I'm out of office. I'm not in my comfort zone. I don't know anything about this, but I can see transferable skills. And I talk to transferable skills without mentioning the technical words. I don't use my jargon as an expert. I talk into his blue flames and the color. Yeah, enough of that. Yeah, I'm riding a little hobby horse here. I'm really a bit of a missionary. Oh, here we go. Just to give you a few examples of some European projects that go into this, and then I'll go into more details. But we've actually been working with workplace guidance over the years, and especially Fjola and other people from FRE, you will hear more about this in the afternoon, have really taken up the idea of going into workplaces. I know you're doing other things now as well, and it's part of an adult guidance network. 14 places. 14 places in Iceland. Would you believe? Tiny, tiny little places, and they have adult guidance in the workplace and other things as well. It is marvelous. But we've actually been working together since mid-2005, 6 on the idea of workplace guidance, and the Icelandic example is wonderful. I have every opportunity all over Europe to talk about the wonderful things going on in Iceland, and I do that because it was an interesting project which actually got this award that we talked about, and also that we could introduce the idea of involving trade unions and that sort of thing. We'll go into that. There is also a current one. There are others as well, but I'm just taking these two. The TRIAS project, which actually reinvents a lot of the things that we've been doing over the years. But we go into other cultures now. It's interesting working, for instance, with people from Slovenia, and we talk to them about going into workplaces and using trade unions. And they say, oh, trade unions, that's interesting. We never thought trade unions could have this kind of role. So that's where we are with that. So I just wanted to mention that. And I think we also might have a nice little picture. Yes, here we are. It's an Erasmus Plus project. We're producing handbooks and pilot projects, and in that way it resembles some of the stuff we've done before. But it's new, and we're new people. And for me it's interesting to return to this after 10 years. I'm going to take you with Ulla. Ulla is the little guidance counsellor, this little nice little woman here. She looks like a lot of Danish guidance counsellors. She's about 50 years of age, and she's a woman. I know last time the Icelandic people talked about guidance counsellors, and they counted how many men do you have in the guidance council area in Iceland. I think you came up with 2, and the rest are women. Perhaps there are more now? All 3? Okay. She's actually on her way into the workplace, and this is from a paint factory again in turbulence. And the ones that she meet there, of course, are the people working there. This person here is the shop steward, the trade union representative. And of course there are negotiations behind all this, you know, the employer has to agree with this, and there is the trade union and so on. But she actually is going into the workplace, and what she has with her that day is a pen, pencil, computer and herself. That's it. She's definitely out of office, and she's She's out of her comfort zone, and it took her a while to understand what's going on in a workplace. And she then, in the workplace, doing guidance, she thought, oh, I'll establish a little corner. And that's interesting in itself. She thinks she's taking the office out of her office and replacing it in a little corner and making a little office there. That's interesting in itself. That's her comfort zone. And then she sat there and waited. Yes, people were passing by, working, trucks, you know, chemical stuff, all kinds of things going on. No visitors. No visitors. Whew. And she sat down in a corner. Then she had an idea that perhaps if you put some, you know, paper and things on the wall and, you know, guidance offers and educational offers and you know, that kind of thing. Posters with big nice letters, and it, you know, it might attract the interest, so people would come by and then would have a look at it, and there might be, you know, there might be some posters up here behind that would probably, now they'll come and visit me. And they didn't. She sat in a little guidance corner for quite a while, and then she started moving around, like I described, you know, earlier. And it's interesting, as soon as she got up and walked around and started being more active, she was much more in the flow, much more active, much more engaged. When she sat in the lunchroom, she was actually much more engaged, and she actually was working and standing and talking to people beside them when they were actually working. That was the kind of situation where people began to talk. But then she discovered, I'm perhaps a little bit trapped in my own way of thinking, because I think I'm working with individuals. I think I'm working with one person at a time. And she discovered the way that decisions are made in the workplace and the way that people work together in the workplace is group-oriented. So, perhaps I should think that I've been trying to individualize my practice in the way that I think that individuals would like to talk to me on an individual basis, which could be okay in some ways and in some cultures, but perhaps I should try to see the kind of culture I have here right before me and see that people are not working in these individualistic ways, and in fact they are working in groups much more. So perhaps I should do something on a group basis. Ta-da! Very good. So she actually had to modify her idea of a corner. So she actually had to work on group basis. And it's interesting that it took her a while to get there. And yeah, I'm trying to illustrate this. A corner is not just a corner. Other examples mix the formal and the informal. These are also examples from workplace guidance, where behind this very informal facade, I've been showing this to people from other cultures than the Nordic cultures, and they say, oh, please, Professor Dr. Plant, because you have to have all the titles every time. Please, Professor Dr. Plant, is this, you said you were talking about guidance, is this guidance over here? They say, yeah, that's the way it looks, you know. We also have bicycle guidance, but this is sitting on the table guidance. And then, of course, the question is, who is the expert here? Very good question. Wonderful question. Exactly what I would like them to see. Who is the expert here? I'll just leave you with that, because it's an interesting illustration of the kind of things that are going on when you actually get into people on an equal footing. Yes, bicycle guidance is also invented. And of course the interlinking with social media and ICT, and Jana will be talking about that later on. So that we don't see the conversation as a standalone conversation. It's of course linked with media, with the use of SMS and other things as well. Salam Anwar. I've taken a day off tomorrow so that we inshallah can meet if you have time. Yours, Yusuf, which also of course links with the cultural differences and so on. You've got to pick that up as well. So I'm trying to illustrate in very practical terms what it actually means to try to reach out to the ones that thought they would never ever see any kind of guidance. They haven't heard about guidance and they don't see the use of it. And their first reaction is, I don't want to talk to these experts. And it's interesting if you then single people out and make them the target groups or the target persons of guidance, you might, through your practice, be stigmatizing people. Oh, you need some guidance. Oh, yeah, you do, yeah, because you're one of these low-skilled workers, you know, and we don't like your sort, really, because we need to lift you up. There's a little hidden and professional hand movement, a little hand signal. You should try this one with me. Try 2 hands now. See if you can do that. It's a little thing we do, very secret one. We try to lift people up into the light so they can unfold. Thank you. Very good. Yeah. It's a little secret thing we do. Yeah, there's also this one, you know, full. Yeah. Yeah, there's also that one. Right. This, of course, has been taken up, and we'll hear more about that from Iceland, but I just wanted to give you a few other examples by trade unions who see the use of actually getting guidance into the low-skilled workplaces and reaching out to the people who perhaps didn't want to hear about this. And we have examples of peer-to-peer guidance activities. You've probably heard about this as well. And there are some Danish examples, the educational ambassadors. There are the learning advisors from the United Kingdom, and they're linked with the TUC, the General Trade Union for Workers. Union Learners is what they do. And this one says, Fælles tillidsrepræsentant, this is the Danish word for the shop steward, the trade union representative. And I just wanted to say there are trade unions across Europe that are interested in this field and are very, very good partners in getting actually into the workplaces and reaching out not just to the ones in work but also to the unemployed through the trade unions. So we're not just linking adult guidance with actually being in work but also with the ones who are seeking for work. That's the idea. Trade unions are quite often very good at that. And some of these examples are wonderful. I'm sure we'll hear more about this from Epling and perhaps Stas Appel in Iceland. But these are examples from other countries. They're linked with strong trade unions, of course. I wanted to talk just a little bit about the transfer of knowledge and policy making. I'm not going into details here, but I just wanted to say some of the stuff we did back in 2005 and 6, both in Iceland and Denmark, actually has been transferred into general policy making, funding and so on. We'll hear more about the Icelandic example in the afternoon. The Danish example is that we actually created adult guidance centers with adult learning experiences, but adult guidance centers all over Denmark called VEU, Voksen- og Efteruddannelsescentre. And we actually established during that period, 2008 and 2009, 22 of those, and they've been remodeled after that. So we actually did that. More permanent structures were then 13 centres. So we're actually doing that on continuing basis. The Icelandic experience, which you'll hear more about in the afternoon, was interesting because it was also an example of transfer of knowledge within a European project. We actually had fruitful discussions among project members, Workplace Guidance 1 and 2, and the idea was to try to see whether it might be interesting to transfer knowledge and expertise and structures and so on into Iceland. And the Icelandic people took this to new heights, and you'll hear more about this. But it's an interesting example of how a European project, Leonardo da Vinci project in those days, can actually be transferred into general policies. And they are now, as you know, 10 years hence, established as adult guidance and adult learning centres all over Iceland. But it's actually an example of knowledge transfer. It's called the open method of coordination in Brussels lingo. But the idea is that we actually inspire each other. And it's interesting to see that sometimes European projects, I'm saying this to an Erasmus Plus project meeting, sometimes projects can actually be more than just put on the shelf. I'm saying this because quite a few of you have probably been in very interesting and good European projects, and you think, ooh, how can they live afterwards? And some of them can't. The funding goes, the project goes. And here's a very nice example of transfer that has lived on for a long time after that, and we actually learned something from each other. And I'm now the ambassador of Icelandic adult guidance because I know how this came about. A wonderful example of knowledge transfer and policy transfer. And the idea, of course, you'll hear more about this, is the whole idea of decentralization into lifelong guidance and learning centers. How are we doing for time, by the way? 15 minutes. Oh, wow, wow, wow. Perhaps we should sing another song. Yeah. I don't think I'll use all the time for talking. I think I'll take discussions afterwards. I'll just mention one aspect of all this. Because we did, this is Guðbjörg and me and quite a few other people, a few years ago we did, I think, an important piece of research which was called the Voice of Users in Adult Guidance. And we actually tried to see whether people who received guidance had a voice in this, had a say in this, in all the Nordic countries. And this report is in fact is very both important but also, I think, illuminating. The main results were, yes, adults would very much like to have a say in guidance, how it's done, where it's done, when it's done, by whom it's done, all that kind of thing. They would very much like to have a say, either through interviews or sitting on boards, or there could be a whole range of things they could do. But when we then asked them afterwards, do you think that we'll listen to you and we'll change the way we do guidance because of the interviews and so on that we've done? The most general answer was, I think that you'll listen to me, but I don't think you'll change. I know it's a very short version of a long report, but that's why I quoted up here, we would like to be heard, but will anyone listen? And I think it's a very, very important aspect of this whole idea of getting guidance to the low-skilled workers who really don't want it or perhaps don't see the need of it. We have to take, in some way, in earnest this kind of voice that comes through here, that people would very much like to be involved and to be heard, and they don't like the experts talking up here when they are considered to be down there. That whole idea of we know best and you don't know nothing, they don't like to be treated that way. They want to be involved on an equal basis, to actually be taken seriously as partners. Then it's okay, but it's definitely not okay to have some expert come into the workplace, tell you what to do and then walk out again. And it requires, from the professionals, it requires, of course, a whole range of skills which are linked with seeing people as equal partners in these kinds of activities. And that's not an easy one. On the one hand, you're an expert. On the other hand, you're an equal partner with someone else who has perhaps some difficulties as perceived by society. Low-skilled workers, we want to upskill them and all that kind of thing. But it's an interesting report, and I thought I will just remind you that if you want to look into how do people actually react to adult guidance, what do they think about this, and what do the professionals think about this? This is probably the most important report that has ever been written about this, because it's very often that we talk about, in our rhetoric, we talk about the centrality of the user. This is what the resolutions of 2004 and 2008 do from the EU. Some of you will remember good old Carl Rogers, the listening to the client and all that. We have a lot of rhetoric and theories about this, but when we actually get into practice, it's quite often the experts that would establish the right thing to do. Like, for instance, I invite you into my office. Perhaps not the best idea. So it's an interesting mix here between listening to people and actually taking them seriously. Yeah. Enough of that. If you're interested, yes, this is my Icelandic takfiri. But if you're interested in reading more about this, there of course are heaps of reports. The CEDEFOP has done a lot of this, as well. But I thought perhaps if I could just leave you with two, I think perhaps these two might be interesting. The one is from the International Handbook of Career Guidance, and it talks about guidance in the workplace on the shop floor, which is one I've written. The other one is my colleague, my PhD student, by the way, Ria Thompson, who has also done some NBL work, and she's written this one which is called Career Guidance in Communities, which actually goes into some of the aspects that I just talked about, the individualization versus the collective approaches. And in that respect, she's an interesting person also to invite into this area. She's done research in this workplace that I just showed you pictures from, the factory, the paint factory. So that was, I think, what I would like to say just now. I would very much like to have a few minutes of discussion. Can we do that? Yeah? Some of your experiences, and I've invited several times my Icelandic colleagues to come up with some comments here. You've been doing this for, at least 10 years now, and I know you'll be talking more about this in the afternoon. Perhaps you would like to say a few things about actually going into workplaces and the stuff you've done. Would you like to do that? Fiola?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Fiola. Yeah.
And the brown.
Yeah.
Because that's the component of career education, and I'm thinking about the role of a counselor in that respect. And I know that Ria has also written a report where ELGPN and NBL cooperated.
That's the one I mentioned on competences. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. On career management skills.
Yeah.
Because I think that in many ways counselors are they need some more transparency on how to career educate or how to assist people in opening their eyes in regards to transferable skills, for example.
Yeah.
Or
My example was about transferable skills, yes.
and the other, their own competences, available opportunities,
Yeah.
and their interests, and all those components.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the development of some kind of a blueprint, like the Canadians, they have a Canadian blueprint, like Australia has a blueprint.
These are blueprints on stages in career development. Yes. Just for those of you who are not an expert in this.
How the individual can sort of gain expertise in running his own career through the support of a guidance counselor.
Yeah.
So that this development is sort of starting in Europe, and more Nordic teams are talking about maybe having something general that the countries can then adjust to their own culture. What are your thoughts on this?
I've been following this also through the Norwegian developments, and one of my other students, Erik Haug, has written a report for the Norwegian government, which is called Rammeverk, a framework for career guidance through the idea of career management skills and the idea of also these blueprints that we are talking about here. I think the blueprints are matrices, a matrix of progression in career learning. That's the short version. And they come in different sizes and shapes, originally from the United States. There's a Canadian one, an Australian one, by the way, and one in New Zealand as well. I think it's very important to have that kind of thing as sort of a mental map, because it actually describes the progression in learning in careers education and careers guidance. I think it's dangerous if it becomes a sort of a straitjacket. We should all be within this way of thinking. But I think it's very nice as this kind of orientation, the map that we know more or less than roughly in which directions we would like people to develop, and we can actually recognize development when we see it, because we can place it somewhere in some kind of taxonomy, because that's what it is. So as this kind of scaffolding, I think it's a very wonderful idea. If it becomes this straitjacket and we all have to think in little boxes, then we're getting nowhere with it. So it's this interesting mix between having some kind of scaffolding and not being, just relying on one way of thinking. But it's interesting because the Nordic people, this is Rie Thomsen, by the way, actually in the European Lifelong Guidance Policy Network, the ELGPN, which you probably all know about. Not really? Yeah. I've been an expert for those for many years. So, and we actually discussed very much the idea of career management skills. What do we think about this in a Nordic context? A career, the idea of career is quite difficult in many countries in the Nordic context. Does everyone have a career? I don't think so. So that's one. Management comes from a different culture, from management culture, not a pedagogical one. And skills, are we really talking about skills or more? Are we talking about competences? So career management skills, those three words have difficulties one by one and certainly together. So Rie Thomsen and others have actually tried to rename this as career competences. So that's what her report is about. I didn't talk about that today, but thanks for reminding us. Yeah. There's another comment.
Thank you for a great performance. I have noticed you mentioned low skilled. Are you thinking about education schools, or are you thinking about life in general? I have a mother of my father is dead, but they are much cleverer than I am, but they never go to school.
Yeah. We've had great difficulties in all these projects, also in the TRIAS project, which is the one I mentioned, which is the current one, to define what we mean by low-skilled. And sometimes it means working in a low-skilled job even though you have lots of other skills. So you're in fact overqualified, but you have a low-skilled job. Sometimes it means that you're illiterate and you can't actually read, and that is, in those terms, a low-skilled job. We have great difficulties with that. The official low-skilled worker is one who has schooling which doesn't go beyond obligatory schooling, which is different from country to country, but usually about 9 years. We have great difficulties with this. I'm not sure we're actually getting anywhere with the definitions of this. So I appreciate what you talked about when you talked about your mother. She has lots of competences, skills, whatever, but she doesn't have any formal skills, no, or competences. Yeah. Yeah, time is up. Oh, oh, yeah.
I want to ask if you check any immigrants within your researches.
Yeah.
During this career guidance, how was it?
Yeah. There's a whole section about this. So we have done a lot about this, and also if you like to look into the Norwegian report I just talked about earlier, there's a whole section about this as well, and how to reach out. And again, a lot of the things I've talked about here do apply also to immigrants and other people with other cultural backgrounds and other languages and so on. Well, this was Peter Plant, the missionary. I talked to you about leaving behind the office, forgetting about the comfort zone and getting into a new way of working to reach out to the low-skilled workers. So if you remember one thing, that's it. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Peter, very much for your presentation, and I would also want to use the opportunity to thank you very much for your friendship with all of us counselors here in Iceland. You've been here so often, and you've inspired us so often, and once again today. So thank you very much.